Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, I can see the messages from the group. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you all, especially the third-year students, postgraduate students, particularly master's and doctoral students. Today's webinar entails empowering your success for third years postgraduates, honors, master's and doctoral writing, or preparation of funding applications. But then before we start, I'd like to introduce our panel members. My name is Usisi Pofeleni, an associate professor and a thematic area leader of the applied electrochemistry at UNISA. I'm also a facilitator for today's program. We also have Miss Busisi Sibia, a professional officer from the National Research Foundation under the Human and Infrastructure Capacity Development. And we have Professor Tricia Necker, a professor at the discipline of pharmaceutical sciences within the College of Health Sciences at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And we also have Professor Willie Chinyamurindi, a National Research Foundation rated researcher, which is a Y2 rating, working at the University of Fort Hare as a professor within the Department of Business Management. So as we go along with the program, we have 3 speakers. Ms. Busisi Sibia will be taking us through the history of the National Research Foundation's postgraduate scholarships, or bursaries, and vitality. And then we have 2 speakers, Professor Tricia and Professor Willie, that will be taking us through the toolkit and the presentations. Thereafter, we'll have our questions and answer sessions. Thank you very much. Over to you, Ms. Busisi Sibia.
Thank you very much, Prof. Eleni. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm going to quickly share my screen, and then I'll get right into the presentation. Thank you so much for an opportunity to come and talk on the history of the NRF's postgraduate scholarships. And also the vitality, such a very strong, a vibrant topic, I must say. The vitality of science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and innovation. So for today's presentation, I'll basically take you through the background of the NRF's postgraduate scholarships, and then we'll look at the ministerial guidelines that were enforced from 2013 through to 2021. Then we'll look at the DSI NRF postgraduate policy, which was implemented from the year 2021 to date, which is what we are presently implementing. And then lastly, we'll look at postgraduate interventions for support that we have in place. To start off with, we'll start off with the mandate of the NRF. So these are the 4 pillars of what the NRF is mandated to do. So we advance knowledge by supporting research, provision of research infrastructure platforms, and provisioning of research equipment, but we also holistically maintain the national research facilities. We also transforming lives, and this we do through provision of postgraduate, emerging, or early career support, primarily through the provision of funding as a means of promoting and advancing research. And then number 3, what we do is inspire a nation. And this we do through supporting and promoting public awareness of, and also the engagement of science. This we do through education, awareness, and communication. And then lastly, at the NRF, we strengthen the national system of innovation by building partnerships and synergies. We actually have numerous partners that enable the NRF to reach the heights that we're able to reach. Classic examples are partners such as CESOL, Mines, F&B. A recent one would be the Energy Mobility and Education Trust, for example. And then we provide system-wide information and intelligence. These are basically the key strategic objectives towards the 2030 National Development Targets. And this is basically what we are aiming for. We want to basically fund 25% of university enrollments to be at postgraduate level. Our baseline data was based on 2017 was at 14.5%, but our hope is that by 2030 we'll then reach the 25%. And then secondly, we're aiming for 5,000 PhD graduates per annum, baseline data being 3,307. And then our last target is basically 75% of academic staff to have PhD qualifications. In the coming slides, you'll be able to see how we are aiming to basically address all of these aspects. This slide basically compares the NRF's funded student graduation data and that of HEMIS student graduation. So HEMIS is the Higher Education and Management Information System. So when we basically did a comparison to see the number of students that are Black, and Black being students that we funded that are colored, Indian, and African, and then comparing them with HEMIS data, what we found is that from the year 2014 all through to the year 2018, the NRF has been graduating more Black students. And also, when you look at the women percentages, it's still the same. The NRF has also been funding more women as compared to HEMIS data. HEMIS data is the higher education put together, basically. And so there is hope, there is somehow confidence that we will be able to reach a target of 80% by the year of 2025. Then the ministerial guidelines. From the year 2013 all through to 2021, we've been implementing the ministerial guidelines. And these guidelines are underpinned by principles of representativity, improved efficiencies, and prioritizing of science, engineering, and technology-related disciplines. And practically what that means is that we had targets in how we fund students to ensure that we fund 87% South Africans. That would be 80% Black, Black being colored, Indian, and African. And then 55% of funding was to go towards women. And then 4% was towards people with disabilities. And then the target on international students was 13% at the time. Okay, just to show you the outcomes for the year 2021 in relation to the targets that were set by the ministerial guidelines. These were the outcomes. I'll focus only on 2021 in the interest of time. So we're able to achieve the SA Black target. The target, we achieved 81% Black, 59% of South African women, and Black women in total was basically 50%. That's South African Black women was at 50%. And so moving on to a slide that shows the proportions of NRF-funded students against the number of students that are enrolled at higher education institutions over a 5-year period. We're able to see that in the year 2017, there were approximately 149,000 students that are enrolled in higher education. And of this number, only 9.1%, which translates to 13,599 students were funded by the NRF. And then as years go by, in 2018, we were only able to fund 8.2% of the total number of students enrolled in universities. 2029, the percentage went lower again, 7.2%. And then in 2020, we picked up by 1%, where the percentage was at 7.3%. And then in 2021, we took a bigger dip by 2%, almost 2%, where we're only able to fund 5.1% of all the students that enrolled in universities. And this is primarily because of the introduction of the new DSI NRF policy in the year 2021. But the coming slides will actually explain it further, because with the new policy, what was introduced was packages that were higher than the ministerial guidelines. And so the scholarship value that students received was higher than the previous years. And while the scholarship value was higher, the actual budget to the NRF did not increase, meaning the number of students we were able to fund was automatically lower. Although the package for the students who were funded was large, but the number of students we funded was way less. Okay. This is basically a breakdown of the fields that the NRF funds. And in actual fact, the NRF funds students across all disciplines and all fields, although there is a focus on SCT, but it's all fields that we fund. Just zooming in the year 2021, 69% of our students that we funded were in science, engineering, and technology, 21% in human and social sciences, and then 10% was in business and economics. And then within this SET percentage of 69, a large proportion went to biological and chemical sciences, followed by medical and health sciences. The next slide will basically just show over all the other disciplines, the percentages across the fields. Okay, and then now moving on to the DSI NRF postgraduate funding policy, where we are to date. This was implemented from the year 2021. So basically, the process of bringing the DSI NRF postgraduate funding policy began with data gathering and analysis. This happened all the way from 2016. And then in 2017 to 2019, there were consultations that took place. Excuse me for that. I have a bit of a cough. Okay. The next slide will basically address what the policy was attending to, the challenges or the problems that the previous policy has, and why there was a need to actually implement the DSI NRF postgraduate funding policy. And then in March of 2019, the board approved the NRF policy. And then in April, the following year, 2020, the first call of applicants was published. And then in the same year, the Minister, Blade Nzimande, then endorsed the policy, and then it became termed the DSI NRF postgraduate funding policy after the endorsement. What followed after that was the opening of the call in April 2021, 2022, and the fourth call in the April 2023. For this year, we are anticipating to open the call in the coming days, so it's in March 2024. And then from next year, we'll then be doing a review, a 5-year review of the policy to identify its positives, negatives, and what it is that we need to change or amend with the policy. Okay, this is one of the reasons, some of the reasons why we had to implement changes to the previous policy. One, it was the low progression rates from honors, masters, and to doctoral studies. There was also a long time to completion and a very advanced age at completion of qualifications. A need for transformation. And then the bursary values were not comprehensive enough. So in the previous policy, the bursary values at honors level were approximately 60,000 per annum. And that was not comprehensive enough to cover all the needs of students. And not only that, in comparison to other agencies, the NRF's funding values were rather low. And so there was a need to bring about a change in that area. Excuse me, I just need a sec to really call. Oh, please forgive me. Okay. And then there was also an absence of funding focused on financially needy students at postgraduate level. And then there was no policy synergy within NSFAS. And then lastly, there was a lack of comprehensive wrap-around support for students at universities. So the next slide will show how we were addressing these. Okay. Ooh, my slides are not moving now. I think I moved too far. Okay, this is just an example of the different values across the different agencies, just to show how the funding values of the NRF at the time were rather not comparative to what other agencies were offering. So if you look at column number 2, Sunby will focus only on honors for now. At honors level, they were providing 96,000. SKA, the square kilometer array honors funding was at 140,000. The CSIR was 155,000. Then the NRF was basically providing 80,000 per annum. So this was the 60,000 per annum, including the assistive technological device. The interventions that the NRF took on and implemented was to introduce postgraduate to provide uninterrupted funding all the way up to doctoral level. And then the NRF now prioritizes funding for full-time studies. And then we've got age limits. The age limits are there to basically ensure that we achieve doctoral completion by the age of 35. The age limits across the different levels at honors level is 28 years in the year of application. At master's level, it's 30 years, and at PhD level, it's 32 years. And then another intervention is the postgraduate pipeline for NSFAS funded undergraduates. And then our targets have then changed, but we'll look at this more in the coming slides. So it's 95% of our funding is allocated to South African citizens and permanent residents. And then that translates into 90% and 55% of allocated funding towards South African Black being colored, Indian, and African, and female students respectively. And then we also offer fit-for-purpose financial packages for postgraduate students. So you will see that for honors, for example, the package is set at approximately 157,000 in the year 2024. And then financially needy students, those with disabilities and exceptional academic achievers, will be funded at full cost of study funding. So the funding is geared towards ensuring that financially students are prioritized. And then there's an alignment with DHEAD undergraduate bursary scheme for students at public universities. These are the allowances that we provide at full cost of study and partial cost of study across the different levels. So this is the package, the scholarship value at full cost of study for honors students. Full cost of study is basically comprehensive. It covers accommodation, food allowance, transport allowance, and also tuition fees. While partial cost of study funding is basically available to cover accommodation and tuition. At honors level, it's approximately 157,000. At full cost of study, partial cost of study is 118,000 per annum. At master's level, full cost of study funding for the scholarship value alone is 176,000 on average. And then the partial cost of study funding is the same between honors and masters. At doctoral level, full cost of study funding is 182,000 approximately at full cost, and then at partial cost is at 107,000. And then you'll see that we offer an electronic device for students that are funded at full cost of study funding, that's 10,000. And then we also offer an assistive technology device for students living with disability, and this is at 20,000. These are the targets under the DSI NRF postgraduate funding policy. So for the citizenship targets, if you'll remember with the ministerial guidelines, it was 87% that we were funding towards South African citizens, but now it's at 95%. And then with the previous policy, it was 13% for non-South Africans, for international students. And with the new policy, the percentage is now 5%. And a woman is still fairly the same at 55%. The South African target is further disaggregated into 90% of funding towards Black students, and then 10% of funding towards white students. If you'll remember the targets for the ministerial guidelines, the percentage of disability was at 4%, but with the DSI NRF funding policy, this is at 1%. And this is primarily because of the number of students with disabilities that enroll for postgraduate qualifications, number one, and that actually apply for postgraduate funding, that it has been reduced to a 1. Okay, so when we offer funding, we look at several things in making funding decisions. One of the first things is recommendations by the institution. So after an application has been submitted and then is being reviewed at the university, the committee that sits will then supply the NRF with feedback on the outcomes of the applications. So we at the NRF will then review those outcomes. That is the recommendation from the university that we look at. We also look at knowledge domains as specified by the funder. So different funders have different requirements. An example would be CESO, that their disciplines, for instance, will be specifically within chemistry. And so we will take into account the different knowledge domains. And then we look at eligibility for uninterrupted NRF funding. And then it's the available budget, which is one of the biggest determining factors. We also look at the NRF annual performance targets, institutional rate of scholarship uptake, postgraduate enrollments at each university, because larger universities will have a higher enrollment as opposed to smaller universities. So there's a need to bring about a balance, but also to include all universities and across all the different geographical areas. And then there's also eligibility for full cost of study funding, where we look at financial need, whether a student is previously funded by NSFAS, by SFAP, whether a student is living with a disability, or is an academic high achiever. For the year 2023, the 2023 academic year, this is our performance against our targets. So the targets was 95% had citizenship for South African citizens and permanent residents, and then 5% for international students. Women was 55%, and the percentages that I mentioned in the previous slides. The performance in 2021, if you'll see, most of the outcomes are red, meaning we did not achieve the target set, except for the women. In relation to women across all the different years, we've been achieving, actually overachieving the required target. Looking at 2023 and 2022, all the other targets have been made for citizenship, for gender, and also for disability. But when it comes to race, we are still in the red. There's still progress to ensure, there's still room for improvement to ensure that SA Black and White student, SA White are funded at the target set of 90% and 10%. But it's something that we are working on. Okay, postgraduate intervention supports that we offer. So we established a mentorship program. These are all the support initiatives that we've introduced, and they're not necessarily housed by the NRF, but we work hand in hand with the university, especially since the universities are the ones on the ground with students and have direct access to students. We work with the research or the postgraduate office with designated authorities from the NRF. We offer workshops and training. We create a supportive community that ensure that students' well-being is looked after. We also provide mental health resources, and we have regular check-ins. Within the NRF specifically, we also embark on processes where we look at progress reports. And by looking into, we actually read each and every progress report of postgraduate students that are submitted to ensure that should students be experiencing any challenges, we are the first people to pick up and to intervene as soon as possible. This slide basically shows our intentions at the NRF. It's not only to have outputs of postgraduate students, but the main aim is to ensure that students move from just having a postgraduate qualification to become early career academics, to become established academics, and to become professors. We do know that it's not all students that will follow this pathway, that they are going to be dropouts, that they are going to be students that work in industry or take up roles that are outside of academia. But our aim is to ensure that we are able to replenish, basically, professors within universities, and that there is a plan or a way that we ensure that students can follow for them to reach the stages of becoming a professor. That's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Busisiwe Sibiya, for your insightful presentation. So I did indicate that the question and answer session will be at the end of the program. We will now proceed with Professor Tricia Nika, who will be talking about toolkit and a presentation. Over to you, Professor Nika.
Thank you, Professor Sibiya. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see. I'm not sure if everyone can see.
Okay, students, once again, a warm welcome to each and every one of you. We've had an overwhelming number of participants that have registered, and with this enthusiasm, it's so exciting and encouraging for us as facilitators to host such a workshop. So throughout this seminar, we are here to equip you with the tools, knowledge, and insight necessary for you to secure your funding application. Thank you so much to Ms. Sibiya that outlined the actual framework that goes behind the DSI NRF funding. She gave us a lot of information there that even gave me an education. So thank you so much for that, Ms. Sibiya. As we go along, students, you can type your query, question, or comment in the Q&A box, and we have an entire team that's going to make sure we answer your questions during the virtual engagement session at the end of this. So once again, on behalf of SciAS, my co-facilitator, Prof. Willie, welcome on board, and let's try and make every moment of this count. So this is the first page of our toolkit, and you will receive this. This will be emailed to all of you at the end of this PowerPoint, and we try to distribute it to as many research officers as possible. So I just want to start by saying this is not a SciAS funding call. This is to help you prepare your actual application for a particular funding application. And because everyone right now is, the South African students in particular are working around the DSI NRF funding, that's the one that we will speak about. So remember, this webinar is aimed at third-year students wanting to go into honors students wanting to go into masters, and master's students wanting to go into PhD studies. This seminar is not aimed at PhD students looking for postdoc funding, because the NRF is hosting their own roadshows around the country through all universities on how to apply for postdoc funding. So before you start your application, there's a few things that you have to make sure that you adhere to. And the first thing is the institutional cutoff time. Now, most people don't know what this is. So the application deadline could say May 30th, but your university, your institution might say that the deadline, the internal deadline, is May 20th, so that they have time to check your application and help you. So make sure to note the internal deadline set by your institution or the funding agency before you submit your application. So you have to be aware of this because it can be different to the actual deadline that you see on the application form. And this is to avoid you missing out on the actual opportunity. The next one is to dedicate ample time towards your application. Allocate sufficient time to complete the application thoroughly and thoughtfully. Leaving things to the last minute never, ever works, okay? So starting early also allows for you to see if there's any system glitches. These can be fixed. You have enough time to review, refine your application, and ensure it meets the requirements and presents your application in the most effective way. Personally, the NRF, as I've gone onto a new system, and I myself trying to submit grant applications and one or two glitches on the system, and then I emailed them and we sort it out. And had I left it for the last minute, that wouldn't have been able to be sorted out in that way. So make sure you dedicate ample time towards your application, not the day before. It's not going to work. Read and understand the framework of the funding. And Ms. Sibiya spoke a lot about the DSI NRF framework, and a lot of work has gone into that. And it's an extremely important documentation if you want to apply for the NRF funding. So always familiarize yourself with the guidelines, the instructions, and the requirements before you can start. This is extremely important for you to understand what is needed before you can start the process, so that it streamlines the process as you go through and avoids last-minute complications. Fulfill the bursary funding eligibility requirements. This is something you want to review at the start to ensure that you meet all the requirements before you start a long application. You don't want to invest a lot of time into something, click submit, and then realize you didn't meet the eligibility criteria. So make sure you provide any necessary documentation or evidence, whatever it might be, to support your eligibility for that application. You also want to ensure all sections of that application is adequately complete. You can't just say, okay, I don't really know what to write there. I'll leave that. I'll skip to the next section. No, make sure every section is adequately complete. And this is why I say dedicate enough time, because then you can seek help to get that section filled in. If you encounter any difficulties, you have any questions, you don't have to hesitate. You can reach out for assistance from the relevant contacts provided by the funding agency or your institution. With regards to the NRF application, there's so much of support. So you can reach out to these relevant contacts and get that. You want to always check and revise the application for any errors before your submission. I sit on NRF panels for various fundings, and I don't want to see typographical errors, inconsistencies. Already, I know that's a weak application. So give yourself time to review the application, identify these errors, typos, inconsistencies, and correct them. You want to take time to proofread your application so it's clear, it's coherent, and it's professional. This is really important. And the last thing is always ensure that your potential supervisors or referees have seen this proposal before you enter their name in the system. As soon as you put their name into the system with the NRF, we get an email. So you don't want to catch your supervisor or your potential referee off guard. You want them to know that you are applying. You want them to have seen this proposal before you apply. You want them to have approved it before you can actually put their name down there. So that's very important for you to take heed of. At SciAS, you can also contact us for support. If you need help with writing your grant application, we will assign you to a mentor that's in the field, and they can guide you through the process. So this is something that we also offer at SciAS. You can just drop us a mail. Since we're talking about the DSI NRF funding year, I took an extract out of their student application and funding framework to just quickly go over it. And Ms. Sibia went over some of them, but I think there's a couple of things that need to be further highlighted. So as she said, that new applications for postgraduate fundings is already out, if I'm not mistaken, or it's going to come out very soon. Pay attention to these dates when the call is out, when's your internal deadline, when's the actual closing date. Continuing students, that means if you already have NRF funding and you are eligible for second and third year of funding, you don't have to submit a new application. You must make sure you submit a progress report. Under your account, under your name, there's a progress report, and this will be checked to see if you are eligible for your second or third year of funding. Now, this is extremely important. This is what's not being told to students at the moment. If you are in third year, if you're in honors, if you are in masters, in order for you to qualify for NRF funding, you need to work towards a minimum of 65% in your average. So if you are in third year now, you need to start making sure that your average is above 65%, because this is the minimum requirement for the NRF. A couple of years ago, as Ms. Sabia said, you could have had any mark. Now you have to make sure you get a minimum of 65%. So third years, honors and master's students, you have to work towards this if you want to ensure you get funding. The other thing that's also new is the entry age requirements. Guys, I don't make these rules. I'm just telling you what it is. For honors, 28 years or younger, master's 30 years or younger, and PhD studies 32 years or younger. Perhaps, as Ms. Sabia said, after 5 years, which is ending this year, this policy will be revised. Maybe they will change that, increase the age limit, but I don't know. But for the moment, this is something you need to pay attention to. There are a couple of options with regards to funding: full cost of study, partial cost of study. The details are in this framework, and you can get a lot of information from just reading this framework. There also is accompanying this document something called the frequently asked questions. It's extremely valuable document. It's on the NRF website. It answers a lot of your questions. Preference is for South African citizens, thereafter permanent residents, but there is a small portion for international students that may also qualify. So remember, the scholarships are open for honors, masters, and doctoral candidates in the field of science, engineering, technology, social sciences, as well as humanities. There are no hard copy applications. You have to register on the NRF Connect system via this link, NRF Connect, create an account, and then you can go to the relevant application and apply there. So all of you can register for this and apply via there. There are no manual applications that will be accepted. Now, these are just the things that you need to know going into the application. And us at SciAS, we realize that as much as there's this information going on about eligibility and what to do and how to do it and how things are, in the crux of the application, there are some topics that come up that students actually don't know what to put in there. So this is the reason on why we want to create this webinar and why we've created this toolkit to actually tell you, help you go along what goes in there. So under each of these topics, as a panelist there, you will get a score. And your score is totaled at the end, and this is how we determine if you get the funding or not. So this is the criteria, and we're going to go through this during this presentation. I'm going to do this slide before I hand you over to Prof. Willie. So one of the things is academic merit. I spoke about this. This is the percentage mark of your previous degree, which should be a minimum of 65% at this moment. Obviously, the higher, the better. Completion time. Completion time, again, you get a score for this. Minimum 1 year master's, 1 year honors, 2 year master's, 3 years for your doctoral degree. But if you take slightly longer, you get a point decrease from your score in the actual scorecard. So again, try to aim that you complete your degree in the institution's minimum time, because this is a contributing factor when you want funding for the next degree. The track record of your research outputs, this is important. Always put down any research prize or award, poster presentation, symposium presentation, conference that you attended in person or virtual. And obviously, if you have peer-reviewed publications, I know, of course, in honors level, sometimes masters, you may not have this. But if you do, it's beneficial, and you put that down. But make sure that your publications are not falling in a predatory publisher, because then it's not counted at all. And you can get this predatory publisher list. It's on the NRF website. It's on the Department of Higher Education's website to ensure that your publications are not in this list. I guess this is something that you're going to have to think about before you even submit your publication. But this is becoming more and more important. And then finally, ensure that your research area is aligned with that of the funder. And again, NRF has a table. We're going to show this to you at the end of the slides, that your topic is aligned with the funder's priority area. For example, if the funder's priority area is TB, you can't be writing a proposal and say that I'm working on diabetes. Already you're going to be disqualified. So make sure that your research area is aligned. So students, that is all for me for now. I will see you again during the question and answer series. I'm now going to hand you over to my colleague, Prof. Willie. Willie, would you like me to change slides for you, or are you going to share your screen?
I think I would be grateful if you do that, Trisha, so that I can also keep a track on the other documents I need here. So, good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you for this excellent and wonderful opportunity to be part of something so amazing as this, to get assistance in understanding the processes of applying for funding. I would declare to you, this past week, I'm at the University of Zululand, and we've had a couple of sessions on issues related to postgraduate support and funding. But, and this was mainly for staff and postdocs. And I know they've allowed a lot of their students opportunity to also listen into this. And not many people get this opportunity. And I say so because I stumbled through my NRF applications, largely coming from taking a chance and also not having anybody around to hold my hand. So I want to also appreciate SciAS for this platform that they've created and the turnout that we've seen and we are witnessing right now of people who would like to learn about enhancing their applications so that they stand a better chance of being funded. I also would like to say, even though our toolkit is primarily focused on issues related to the NRF funding, these are issues that come about with any form of funding that funders generally would like to see. And in this regard, we applaud the NRF for at least trying to benchmark the process and have it also run at par with a number of local, African, and international funding institutions. And that's quite crucial and very important to mention. So I'm going to take you through aspects related to the actual contents of the proposal that you're writing. And I think for third years, this can be a bit daunting because at that particular time, at least I use the example of my context I work in at the University of Fort Hare. Most of our third years would have just been exposed to a research methods course in which they are being taught how to do research and would not even have attempted to do a mini research project of some kind, but have been taught really basic awareness of issues related to how research can be done. So this platform therefore becomes important because third years are getting an opportunity to actually now see what goes on into some of these headings. And the first heading we'll look at as part of the criteria is related to the problem statement. This is similar across the board, even in funding for established researchers. I mean, there needs to be a location of a particular problem to this context in which you want to research that particular issue. And I'm going to give some examples as we go on that I prepared to try and help you here. So we must be able to actually articulate from the literature. And when we talk about the literature, put simply, we are talking about what other researchers have done or what is out there in terms of our understanding of a particular phenomena. And this is really the idea of a literature review or looking through what we've called here in this document, the relevant literature. And really, the relevant literature consists of literature that is locally available on the African continent, available even internationally. So you ought not to really starve yourself in terms of what you're consulting as part of the literature base that you're looking at. You're really trying to say, if I am interested in understanding decent work in farming communities, I need to at least show an understanding in the proposal to say, how has decent work generally or in farming communities been understood in other contexts? So you can then go and consult. Google searches also help here. Even your library has dedicated resources, and I know some libraries have dedicated librarians for each faculty. So line up a talk with your librarian to say, I'm new at this. I need to find literature on this topic that I'm interested in because I need to craft up a problem statement. And that will then help you to actually then be exposed to the different types of databases that exist. And a database, if you like, is a large collection of libraries and volumes of work that you can consult in terms of finding work that you want to actually work to search for a problem statement. Now, having done that, in looking at the problem statement, you can ask yourselves some questions. What have other researchers done around this particular topic? In other words, what do we know about this from what others have done? And then you can even extend it further to say, what do we not know about this particular topic? And how then can we enhance our understanding by this particular topic. So if you look through a survey of that work and you notice that, well, predominantly a lot of people are not focused on women as farmers and issues related to decent work in those communities. And then you build it up by looking at the different sources around and what others have done. And I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later on when we talk in the next section of a literature review. The crucial problems. Why is this a problem? And why should we bother and care about this particular issue? Who is affected by the problem? And how does this particular problem affect this particular individual or community group? So in essence, for example, a research problem might be a gap in the field of knowledge or a problem that needs to be solved, or sometimes a lack of understanding to a specific group of people, communities that may have been neglected in terms of understanding what they are going through. This then builds up to another crucial part. And I want to also mention that the NRF does allow us to be able to embed references inside our documents. So if you were writing your grant application here and you wanted to cite a source, Smith 2024, argues that there's been less focus on the role of farming communities in understanding aspects related to decent work. So you can incorporate those in types, what we call in-text references. And then as part of the attachment that you can put right at the end as a Word document, you can then attach your list of sources just to show that all of this that you're getting about this particular phenomena is not thumbstuck or from anywhere, or these are just issues that are real and they've got a basis of encouragement in terms of where they are coming from. This then leads to the second part of the contents of the proposal, which is talking, and a major part in terms of the scoring. A major part really concerns also your understanding for the rationale and literature review. Please note there are two words there, if you like, rationale and literature review. The rationale really talks to the motivation leading to why you want to do this particular research. In other contexts, it could also be regarded as what they call the significance of the study. Why is the study so important? So motivate why that is important. And the second thing you must motivate and discuss really concerns the literature review, a review of the literature that is around. And again, you're now using those skills that you've learned in the problem statement to build up on that particular literature. Now, you can consult different people. Everybody has got everybody, and it's people who have taught and helped raise their awareness in research methods. We predominantly try to classify the literature into three groups of literature. The first type of literature, known as the conceptual literature. The second type of literature, known as the theoretical literature. And the third type of literature, which is known as the empirical literature. Now, how different are they? Within the conceptual literature, you are identifying key concepts that you are working on or seeking to research about. You could provide a definition of those concepts. You could also provide a level of understanding why those concepts are important. You could even provide also how the understanding of those concepts have evolved over time. That is the conceptual literature. So if you forget anything, it's concept for conceptual. So it's understanding the key concepts that you are working with. The second group is the theoretical literature. And we as people operating in an academic context, we know that most of the work, if not all of the work that we do, is underpinned by different theoretical postulations that help us to understand that particular work. So a theory merely offers us a world of understanding to a phenomena. You can talk about popular theories that are in existence, such as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow talks about moving from lower order needs to higher order needs, and the highest form of needs that we could have, he frames as self-actualization. So those are just theories. By the way, theories are not meant to be eternal. And by that, I mean, they are not meant to be framed as an explanation to each and everything. Theories come about through research that people are doing, and revisions of theories happen and they enhance our understanding. So you could clearly try to identify some theoretical aspects that you could work with in terms of the phenomena that you're working with. So if I was working on decent work, I would look at the psychology of working theory as a possible theory to say this theory helps me understand the phenomena better and show how it does. A third group of literature then is the empirical literature, and the word empirical driven from the idea of the philosophy called empiricism, which is this idea of wanting evidence to actually show by evidence and by showing in terms of what do we currently know and do we have a body of literature that is there speaking to the issues that we want to talk about. Please note in the toolkit, we then mentioned something crucial. Ensure that relevant and at least 60% of current not more references are not more than 5 years old. And that happens a lot. I often don't understand it as a supervisor to honors, masters, PhDs, and postdocs even. Sometimes you assist students to get recent literature sources, and people are still interested in going to go and dig for 1916 reference sources, 1945 reference sources. Now, you can get away with it, particularly in the literature theory section of the literature review, but mostly in the empirical section of the literature review, and even in the conceptual literature, you really need to make sure that you are using recent sources. And also this literature is coming from credible sources, which are mainly from accredited journals, reports, and conference proceedings. Accredited in this case, I apologize, those who are here who are seeing me explain everything, we mustn't assume everybody knows what accredited means. Accredited means that there's been some form of vetting that has been done by a community of scholars, and these community of scholars are convinced that this particular source that you are looking for as material to cite in your proposal has that credibility. Thanks to platforms such as AI, there are some nice AI tools that exist that can allow you to take a journal name, put it in that AI source, and it can actually generate some form of meaning to say, this is the frequency that this journal publishes, this is other articles and themes that it publishes, and you can also use that as vetting. But through the DHET, an accredited list of journals has been created, which is always sent out to institutions. If you go to your library or you ask your supervisors or colleagues in your department, and I'm sure as part of the toolkit, Tricia, we can also make the DHET accredited list of journals be available as a reference point to the colleagues. And then a section in the scoring as well, which needs a bit of attention, revolves around the aims and the objectives. Really, the aim is the main goal of the project, and the objectives identify key issues that you are placing as issues that receive focus. You would remember a lot when we teach, or even in high school, there's a lot of talk of SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. This also helps us in terms of understanding how you frame some of these objectives. And it must not be a description of the methods. We're in no way talking about how the method you're going to use. We're just talking about what is it that this research is going to achieve. And if there are sub-issues that you think that you could flag out, you can mention those as part of the objectives. We can go to the next page, Tricia. Thank you. The next issue, which is also crucial in the scoring again, is for you to identify the methodology and your proposed research plan. Really, in this section, we are now asking you to talk about how the research will be conducted. And if you like, in the previous section, we were asking you to locate the why of the research. Why do you want to do this research? In this section, please tell us with detail about how the research will be conducted. There are two issues here, methodology and a research plan. So methodology talks to methods. What type of methods are you going to use that are going to help with your proposed project that you want to work on? Methods differ, and there are many methods that could be used. You could have qualitative methods, you could have quantitative methods. In some cases, you could even propose literature searches, bibliometric analysis. All of those can also be deemed as possible methods. But the most important thing around the methods are really the activities and the timelines. And we've framed that and we've put that in the toolkit. In some institutions, we do require financial needs plan as part of the work plan. However, the methodology is systematic in nature. So if you're going to use two phases of data collection, maybe a qualitative and a quantitative method, you can take time to actually extrapolate how each of those two feature. A component people often forget, and I get this with some students. Prof, I'm going to use many methods. The more the methods, the merrier, because I will arrive to a better understanding of truth. Not quite. I think what we're looking for and what is being looked for here by reviewers when they review this is you've chosen the best method that aligns with the objectives and the aims that you have stated. So there's a necessity of also then understanding what we spoke about earlier, which was the research problem, and then linking it also to what you are wanting to achieve. The research work plan assists in terms of activities that you're going to do, how feasible they are, state with timelines. And of course, the timelines can also be modified even when the funding has been accepted, and that's allowed. But we just want to get a picture that you've got a realistic understanding of what you want to achieve. And also, you also put the picture in view of the studies that you are engaged in. So if it's a master's study, you are aware of the duration it takes. If it's a PhD, you are aware. If it's an honors study, which is 1 year, you are also aware, and your activities align with this awareness. And then we can go to the next part, which talks about the anticipated outputs. Again, it's also on the scoring sheet. It's an important part. I always say in this particular section, think of 4 things. The first thing you must think about is the academic community. And why is that important? Because in the problem statement, you acknowledged what others have done. So how does your research potentially adds voice to the academic community in enriching the academic community? The second thing you should think about are practitioners. And really, practitioners are people who are working in different sectors in practice, basically, who probably work in real-world scenarios of situations that are happening. Think of how practitioners can benefit from this research. The third group you can also put there would be policymakers. Policymakers would talk to the work that is being done by our guest, Ms. Sibia, who are influential in also informing the direction of where knowledge production is going in this country. So think of policymakers, your parliamentarians, your MPs, and so forth, how they could potentially benefit from this study. But we often neglect a fourth group, which is an important group, which is really society and the community. How does the community potentially benefit from the study that you're about to conduct? And in so doing, you must then identify what type of output can exist for each and every one of these people. So for the community, yes, you can give them a journal article, but you ask yourself a question, how many people are going to read that journal article? So perhaps maybe your pitching of the benefit of the community should include an understanding of things that are practical to the particular community. For instance, as part of outputs, you are allowed to, from the project, to have what are known as science engagement events, where you can actually hold an event which is linked to that particular project and invite people who were part of that particular data collection or who have a keen interest in those findings to be able to sit around the table and to also hear what these findings are, and also for you to also hear their voice in terms of the findings. So output that is required or that can be flagged here are your journal articles, book chapters. You can talk about presenting at forums, workshops, poster presentations, oral presentation, and even with detail. You can even mention, and I think maybe at honors, you may not be aware of some of the conferences, but you can even look around to say, okay, I'm interested in work that is related to the management discipline. And after I've done this research, I would love this work to be presented at a conference like Mbali, which is run by the University of Zululand, or SAMES, or the IBC conference, or SAPAM, as conferences that I can attend and where stakeholders in my field will be there to be able to assist me. All of this should really be aligned also to the NRF's open access policy. For example, it makes us have certainty that the work that you're producing as output is readily available to be downloaded by colleagues without any impediments of a financial nature. And that talks to this issue of open access. Next slide, Trisha. And then finally, as I come to the end, we then look at the potential impact. So here you then address, now that I've done this research, or after I've done this research, what type of impact will this research have on things around me in my context, on the African continent, in the world, for instance? And these could be now things that are practical and particularly need motivation of the socio-economic and environmental impact of the research, including also how the research will contribute towards how society works. Here you can even try to position how this will support, how your findings will support issues related to policies that are specific. So if you were looking at a specific issue in a community, and you say this research fits and supports issues related to the RDP, the Rural Development Policy, and particularly on angles such as the following. So you're merely unpacking the impact in view of the real life, societal, economic, political, if you like, and also Africa-wide interventions, global interventions. And here we can talk about issues such as the Sustainable Development Goals. We can talk about issues such as the Africa Agenda 2063. The next section also requires a bit of attention, and usually this is done through a drop-down menu. And this is the alignment with national strategies. South Africa has got a number of national strategies that are in place. These strategies include, for instance, poverty alleviation, job creation, strategies of promoting addressing of grand societal challenges, strategies related to the promotion, for instance, of the social sciences and the humanities, and I'm speaking from my discipline. So all you need to do here is, if you're not sure, just ask yourself a question. Let me drop down one of these menus and ask myself, okay, one of the strategies that is there is job creation. Does my research in any way lead to the creation of more jobs? And if it does, you then select that particular strategy. And then you provide a little motivation and a narrative to be able to support that. And that's allowed because it's also you trying to show the benefit of the project in view of ongoing and very busy types of activities that affect the day-to-day work of our country. This proposed research, therefore, would then fit in these different types of strategies, and these strategies really require you to have attention. And I really say here, because it's a drop-down menu, you can really feel for yourself and see what's there and align yourself with those particular instruments. A crucial part in terms of the scoring as well is the budget. The budget is really a realistic estimate of how you envisage the project costs will be. It's important to also record and be realistic in nature and be aware of limits and ranges that are supported as part of the budget. So ask yourself, what does the NRF potentially fund and what does the NRF not fund? I kid you not, I'll admit a little mistake I made. One time I was applying for a grant and the call specifically said the NRF does not fund for office equipment or building renovations and so forth. And for some reason, because I was working in an office that I think needed a little bit of extra chairs and extra renovations around air conditioning and so forth, I wrote that particular aspect. And when the review came back, yes, the grant was rejected. And I'm sure there were other reasons as well why it was rejected. But one of the things that the reviewer urged that in future I should do is to read thoroughly the call for documents and be aware that some of the things that I had put as part of what I will do are actually things that the NRF has explicitly said that they will not fund. So make sure that your motivations are provided in the line with an explanation and it links with the study objectives. It's not just about putting numbers, it's about saying, if you want to get to attend a conference, do some benchmarking of how much a local conference is, how much its travel is, and you can even indicate in the motivation based on estimates from the current year, factoring in a slight fluctuation in terms of currency, blah, 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 blah. You can also have a budget put there with specific motivation and detail. And I think that's that, Tricia. I think the last slide simply tells us which institutions are classified as HDIs. And also it also tells us the priority areas that the NRF seeks to fund. And I think Ms. Sibia in her opening did address some of these issues. I won't say much about those unless they come up through the discussion later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Willie and Prof. Tricia, for your wonderful presentation and the depth details regarding the application processes. And a shout out to Ms. Sibia, who has been answering on the question and answer sessions. I think she has answered more than 33 questions regarding these application processes. Thank you so much for that. We are now going to the question and answer, and there are so many questions that are here, but I will start with the people who have raised their hands. I think the people who have raised their hands is Poland, Michelle. You can go ahead with your question. Michael, you can go ahead. Michael, are you in this meeting?
Sorry, that was by mistake.
Oh, okay. I think if this was a mistake, we'll go to Kilebogile Selema. Kilebogile, do you have a question? Because your hand was up. Okay, I think your head is down. We can go to Mabato Moshushi. You can go ahead with your question, but I will read some of the questions from the chat at a later stage.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. That was a very informative session. Thank you to everyone that is involved in the speakers. Also, I'd like to ask, in the case, let's say you have a student, because you spoke about time limit being also a factor in you being selected as as a student will be funded. Let's say your master's or your honor studies took long because of institutional administrative holdbacks. Will the students still be or suffer penalties when being selected in a case where it's not the student's fault that the process took long, but it was administrative challenges, even though the student, let's say, she was done? Hello?
We can hear you, Miss Babato.
Oh, yes, I'd completed my question. I asked that in a case where, let's say I'm a student who's applying for funding, and you've also said that funding, that how long you take is also a factor that will determine if you get selected. It's a criteria. Let's say my master's took longer than 2 years because of administrative challenges of the university. How does then the NRF consider a student like that who took longer than 2 years because of administrative challenges of the university, and not necessarily that the student took long?
Okay, thank you for that question. I'll try and attempt, but Ms. Bia and my panelist members will try and answer your question. But usually, of course, we know that for master's program, it is a 2-year funding. But of course, there is a 1-year extension whereby you would list that, okay, the student delayed because of this reason and that reason. And we know that we are coming from the corona and so many issues that are happening. So there is a 1-year extension for master's program. But of course, some of the colleagues would add on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I believe we have, I don't know if there's someone who wants to add something from the panelist members.
Yes.
Sorry.
Ms. Sibia, you can go.
Thank you. You are accurate in your response. We do have an extension opportunity for students who are funded and need longer to complete. But in listening to what Mabato was saying, it seems to me that she was making reference to applying for the next qualification. I don't know if I really understood you correctly. And in that case, we have a continuum. So when you look at the scorecard, which is available on the framework document, students who have been funded, or the completion year is the minimum requirement plus a year or plus 2 years, are still eligible for funding. Although you have to keep in mind that funding is contested. So yes, you may be eligible, but because it's contested and we've got a low budget and we don't fund a lot of students, then you might or might not be funded, but you are still eligible in that case.
Thank you, Ms. Bia. Prof. Trisha, did you want to add something on that?
Yes, to the student, in addition to what my colleagues have just said, also when you're writing your application, there is a small space where you can either provide evidence for what caused your delay, or you can write a small narrative on why there was a delay in your studies. So there's a chance for the panel to also see what exactly happened. So there's space in the application for you to write that in. Thanks.
Thank you so much, colleagues. We have another question from Tiboho Mamela. You can go ahead with your question. I'm not sure if Mabato, you can lower your hand because we've answered your question, or you have a further question on that.
No, I'm done.
Thank you.
Hello, panelists. Can you hear me? Hello,
We can hear you, Tiboho.
Yes, thank you very much for this informative session. I found it very informative and very enlightening. Thank you very much for organizing this. My question is that I'm currently a PhD candidate at UJ. I've been struggling to get funding for quite a long time. So I don't know if there's any assistance that I can get, but I'd requested that if maybe the program can organize a practical example of completing the application process, because a lot of students find it difficult to complete the application process because of some technicalities. And by the time that they ask for assistance, the assistance is not available. So, because I've seen with other institutions and other bursaries, what they do is that they would have a session where students are taken through the application process of what to complete in what sections and what is required and what is not required, so that some questions do not come as confusing and as challenging, in order for students to find it easy to complete the application process. So that's one question. The second question is an extension of this. If there can be any intervention for students that come from rural areas but are conducting advanced research that are relevant in the field of the fourth industrial revolution, like I am, but I'm struggling to find. I've been applying for NRF and different funding, but have not received any assistance up to this day. Even thinking of registering my degree, because how can I study a PhD and contributing to the body of knowledge? I have a lot of research publications, but I'm struggling to find funding. Even my professors are not really helping, even the institution as well, the postgraduate school. I'm in their offices almost every day asking for any assistance, NRF, any funding, but I'm not getting assisted. So I'd really appreciate your assistance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Teboho, for your question. And we understand your pain, but I believe that you are in a right place whereby you have been guided by various professors and Miss Bia, who would possibly give you an insight on what you can do, and especially the two professors that were giving a guide regarding the proposal, how you can possibly prepare your proposal. And maybe you can possibly reach out to SciAS if you need further assistance. If you have been working with your professor, and then maybe you reach out to SciAS for further guidance, because we are working with students from various stages, master's, PhD, and we've been guiding them throughout this NRF application. But of course, the colleagues will give you a guide or further guidance on how you can maybe approach your application so that you can get a proper funding for your maybe PhD or postdoctoral fellowship. Thank you.
In addition to that,
okay, yeah, you can continue.
In addition to that, Prof. Eleni, it's unfortunate that research office is not assisting you, Deboho, but that's the first point of call, especially with any NRF funding, because those are the people that we work hand in hand with. Physically, we at the NRF are in Pretoria, but what the research or postgraduate offices are physically within the universities to assist you. So my advice, similar to what Prof. Eleni said, is one, please contact the DA responsible for PhD funding. Secondly, in relation to a step-by-step process in completing the application, we'll be doing institutional engagements. And what these engagements are is basically interacting with the institution and meeting the NRF-funded students for the year 2024, and also informing students that are interested in funding for the year 2025. We'll be going to all universities this year. We're actually starting next week. So please contact your research or postgraduate office to find out the dates, because they're the ones who confirm when we can come through and provide that step-by-step guidance on how to apply. Previously, this was done online, but now we'll be doing it in person as the NRF professional officers and just the staff. So that's how we'll be able to assist you in completing the application. But the first point of call, which is something we repeat, is the most important thing you can do for yourself is to just read the framework document. You know, we work on that document annually. And it's a team that sits down to review that framework document just to ensure that everyone is able to read, to understand, and to complete the application by purely reading the document. But what we have unfortunately found is that some students just do not read it. And then they'll ask you questions that relate to the framework document that just shows that the student has not read the framework document. But if you read it to the team and then start with the application on the online template, it makes it a whole lot easier. And this is not just for you, Tebogo, but it's everyone that's listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tebogo, as well as Ms. Bia, for that depth explanation. We have another question from Shimona Proceed. You can go ahead with your question.
Thank you very much. I heard earlier that you mentioned an institutional cutoff date for the application. Does this mean that we will get a chance to amend the application after we receive feedback from the institution before it goes to NRF?
Thank you, Shimona. I think Ms. Bia can answer that.
You know, the challenging thing when it comes to that institutional closing date is that it's not the NRF closing date. So the NRF has specific closing dates, and different institutions will then set their own internal closing dates for specific processes that they have. And we at the NRF do not necessarily have a problem with that. But when it comes to the NRF, an application has to be submitted on the timelines that we have set. So when it comes to opening the application, once the closing date has come, there's no way of undoing anything when it comes to applications. So that's the set closing date for all applications across the country, irrespective of the closing dates that were put by universities. I don't know if that explains clearly for you, ma'am.
Shimona, if I can just Shimona, if I can just quickly tell you, if you are submitted to your institution and there's still time before the NRF final closing date, yes, there is a window to which you can amend your application. So this can be done. Either your DA will tell you there's something you can improve or something you need to change, or if there's something you decide that I needed to change and there is this small window, yes, it can be done.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. There are so many questions that we have on the question and answer, but we will be selective. But then the panel members will be able to assist with answering the questions on the question and answer session. We also have some questions on the webinar chat. I'll start with that. There is Amanda there who said, is it acceptable to apply for a conference funding only, or you apply only if you are funded on a particular year? That's the first question. Ms. Bia,
Yes,
or any of the panel members?
So the funding opportunities that we went through are specifically for the honors, the masters, and the doctoral funding. So it's not you can't apply for the conference as a standalone. In that case, no, it's for the actual qualification. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bia, for that answer. We have other questions, but I'll read possibly 5 questions because of time. So we have one anonymous attendee saying, I wanted, do you have any resource assistance for master's students who are financially excluded from university? I was registered for master's in counseling psychology, and I got financially excluded from the university. That's one of our questions.
Yeah.
Can I come in? Prof. Falen, can I come in on that one?
Yes, you can come in.
Okay. So I know our focus is promoting students applying through the NRF. Yes, that's great. There are other platforms that you can take to apply. For instance, because you just mentioned counseling psychology, You could also look at the Health Welfare SETA, HW SETA. They are very active, and I know of students currently I'm working within the realm of industrial psychology and also counseling who are funded through the HW SETA. So I'm sure they've got their own requirements, but I think also colleagues could look at the issue of the SETAs. And then the second one, just thinking about it, was the one on the colleague who mentioned that they are interested in 4IR in rural communities. My university is also one of those which is in an urban setup and a rural context. And again, the SETAs have come in very handy in assisting. So SETAs like the MI SETA, SETAs like the engineering SETAs are very active in that. So all I just want to say is let's not limit ourselves. I think the most important thing that the toolkit does, it exposes us to general headings that are needed in a number of funding instruments, which anyway, locally, internationally, and even outside of the NRF, though we are encouraging people to use the NRF, but also explore the chances of the SETAs. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Willie. I'm not sure if Ms. Bia wanted to add something, or we go ahead with other questions from here.
Just for a sec, Prof. Willie, I agree fully with Prof. Willie. Yes, we do offer funding at the NRF, but you know, when you look at the percentage of the number of people, the percentage and the number of people that we offer funding to is very small. So it's wise to apply at the NRF and also consider other funding institutions. So I fully agree with Prof. Willie.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bia. Another question is that with regards to getting a mentor from SIAS for the application processes, how do you go about it? Prof. Tricia and Willie, can you answer that question, please?
Yes, they can just send us an email telling us their field of study and their level of study, and we can assign them a mentor, and they can contact us. I believe it's Kalani's email on the toolkit. It's on the first page.
Thank you, Prof.
If it's not, we will distribute that email address to which they can contact, and we can assign them to a mentor. Thanks.
Thank you, Prof. Tricia. There's another question. There are so many questions. I think colleagues can assist in answering them on the chat, but I'm just reading randomly. There's a question from Samke Lomganti saying, good day. What if your completion time was delayed by pandemic? Would that still get your point deducted? That's one of the questions from the charts.
By point, I assume that the applicant is making reference to the scores on the scorecard, but I'm not sure. But in that instance, the student will have an opportunity to indicate the reasons, just as Prof. Naika had said, the reasons why there was a delay. But should it have been delayed by anything, you have to state it, and then your score will then be plus however many years that you would have taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bia. There's another question from Poya Nasitu saying, good day. I'm doing Masters of Laws. Is it possible for me to get funding?
Yes, law is one of the disciplines that we do cover for funding.
Thank you so much. Okay, there's one anonymous attendee saying, can I get funding once my master's has commenced? How does NRF consider cases where studies of a student are longer than 2 years or honors due to institutional administrative factors? I do believe that we have answered a similar question to this, whereby we had said that you can apply for NRF funding. And of course, if you exceed the 2 years, you apply for the extension. I believe we have answered something like this in our webinar chats. unless one of the panelist members would like to add something from it.
It was answered, Prof. Esosipo. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Someone is saying in NRF Connect, the status claim processed means. Possibly I'm not understanding the question. In NRF Connect, the status claim processed means there is a question mark on the means.
That would mean the funding. That would mean the funding has been claimed. I'm not sure what they mean, but the funding has been processed for claiming.
Yeah, possibly. Say because it's saying claim processed in inverted commas. And then what does it mean? I believe that Anonymous is asking, has the funding been claimed or not? There's another person saying, is funding eligible for any person above 40 years of age?
No, so the limits are for honors, it's 28 years in the year of application. For masters, it's 30 years. For PhD, it's 32 years. That's in the year of application. So for example, students who will be applying with the call currently that's going to open in the year 2024, that would mean by the 31st of December, applicants have to be within the said age limits, 28 for honors, 30 for masters, and 32 for doctoral applicants.
Thank you so much for that. There's another question from JC Mayer saying, good day. I'm currently a third-year student. I would like to refer back to the valuable information shared once compiling my application. In the chat, it was said that the toolkit and recording will be shared. May I ask via which platform it will be shared? I think Kolani can answer that.
Yes, thank you so much, Prof. We'll share it via emails because we have collected their emails.
Thank you so much, Kolani. I'll just read maybe 3 more and then we close the session because of the time. There's a question from Sandy Lepat colleagues. I believe that they are typing their answers on the question and answer session. We have Sandile Kamana saying, good day. I'm also a third-year student and looking to apply for NRF funding in order to fund my honors year. Am I also required to write a research proposal in order to get a chance to get funding? Yes, everybody who's applying for NRF funding would be required to write a proposal. And the information that was shared by the colleagues here on how to look from the criteria and different sections, they are very valuable for all the NRF applications. But colleagues can maybe talk more regarding that.
Just to add, yes, there is a need, but oftentimes students normally get so scared when you say proposal. Like they honestly get scared and think they have to put together this 1,000-page document of what it is they're going to do. But that is not the case. Yes, we do need to know what you envision doing. There are defined steps which were beautifully defined or explained by the professors before me in that the toolkit that was provided, but it's not something scary. So it's something that you will be able to do. It's putting together your idea down and basically detailing what you plan to do. It's nothing scary. It's actually an exciting process, I'd like to think. But yes, there is a need to submit your research proposal.
Thank you so much, Ms. Via. There's a question directed to you, basically. This question is saying, good day, Ms. Via. As a third-year PhD student, if you've been granted a 12-month extension but only received funding for the initial 6 months, what steps would you take to obtain the remaining funding? particularly after submitting a progress report?
There could be reasons around that case. So the first thing would be to submit an inquiry to the research office. And should you need further assistance, it would then be to the NRF, specifically in the grants management division. They can be able to assist you. But for us to get a conclusion now, what you can do is send me an email. And what I can do is then forward it to the grants division so that they can investigate your case, because there are many elements. And oftentimes students will expect things to go a particular way without full understanding. But please submit just send me your inquiry to my email address, and then I can look into it.
Thank you so much for that. There's another question saying, good day, I'm an honors student. My status still on NRF internal screening. I would like to know, for those who were not funded for 2024, when will they receive the rejection letters? In case where students opt to take another offer instead of NRF, do their space get filled? That's one of the questions that they are asking.
Rejection letters this time around were delayed in them being sending out, but we have commenced. I think we commenced actually 2 weeks ago, if not 3 weeks ago, that rejection letters have been sent out. But they should, I'll have to just find out, they should have been completed the process by now. And in the event that your status has not changed, please make sure that you log on and check, because most students have received their rejection letters. But for the year 2024, we have concluded funding decisions.
Thank you so much for the question, for that answer. There's another question saying, I'm a student in a foreign country and have partially funded from an organization. Can I still apply for funding?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Partially funded from another funder, but with the NRF, yes, you could be eligible for funding on partial cost of study, but then we also have caps in relation to that. It's something that we'll have to look into as an individual case, but there is a possibility. But does that mean the student where is the student stationed? Are you an international student studying within a South African university, or what do you mean?
Yeah, they were not specific, unless they can possibly type another answer to say, okay, I'm from an international space and this is what is happening. But for now, this is the question that I read from.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'll just read. Looking at the time, we are at 16:37. The question from Beryl Bukes is saying, good day, I'm a PhD student in psychology. My question is, what if one comes from disadvantaged communities, not being able to afford studies and only at a later stage studies? Why limitation of 35 years?
The age limit is such a contentious issue. It's something that we deal with every single time. And the key reason why it's being implemented is just so that we ensure that we get graduates that complete PhDs at the age of 35. With that said, the NRF policy, the postgraduate policy is actually going to be reviewed, because this is a big issue, especially the age one. So next year, it's something that will be revisited to see if it is serving a purpose, should it be changed, because we've been getting concerns from all angles when it comes to the age limitations. But the real reason why it's there is not to discriminate. It's purely to ensure that we increase the number of PhD graduates, which are 35 years or younger in that case, so that the graduates are able to be in the system of innovation for a long time and be able to produce other PhD candidates. Because you can imagine, if someone does their PhD or starts their PhD at the age of 40, and you consider aspects of, say, being employed, having a family, it will probably take that person about 5 years, if not longer, to complete that PhD. And by the time they complete their PhD, the amount of time that they have to serve within academia generally is very limited. And when you look at the direction of where we're going in relation to innovation and the need to produce PhD students within the country with the aim of increasing innovation in all the different aspects, from healthcare to technology, the need is great. So that's why we have the specific age limit. And with that said, we also receive so many applications, and the amount of students that we fund are so limited. So in essence, we can't fund everyone, even if all students who are above the age of 40 were eligible to apply. The number of students that we'll be funding is very limited. But it's something that we're definitely going to be reconsidering when we're looking at the review next year. But as things stand, the age limit is what it is. It is going to be implemented even in the call for 2025 application. But it's something that we look into. We have heard all the concerns that have been raised. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your depth answer, Ms. Bia. I think we have the last two questions on the chat. The question from Kanyi Somakadla is saying, when writing a research proposal, are we given maybe a topic that the research proposal should be based on? The answer is yes. If you're doing from honors up to your doctoral level, you work hand in hand with your supervisor on developing a title and, of course, working on your research proposal. So I believe that, yes, of course, you need a proposal and your aims and objectives before applying for the NRF funding. I'm not sure if one of the panelists wanted to add from what I've said based on the question raised. If not, I'll go to the last question for the day. We have a question saying, good day. If you have received a grant and change a topic after a year, will it affect the grant at all? I'll raise this to the panelist members.
I actually responded to this question. In essence, the answer is no. That's the general response. Generally, no, because you still have the same supervisor and there may be reasons why you're changing. And generally, the answer is just no, it will not have an effect on your funding. So I'll leave it there. But there can be cases, especially when students want to move from the institution, but they got a funding under a particular researcher, where then you muddy the waters. But the general response is no, it will not.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bia. I do not see any further question, but if we do have further questions, of course, they will be shared with Kolani, and then we'll be able to answer those questions further. But I would like to thank everybody who has been able to attend this meeting, particularly the PhD, master's, honors students, and postgraduate students. I mean, the third-year students who have given time to attend this meeting so that they can learn on how to put up an application. I'd like to shout out also to the panel members, to Ms. Bia, who has been answering all the questions from the chats, more than 33 questions that she has been answering, and also Prof. Tricia Necker, as well as Prof. Willie, who has been giving presentation regarding on how to prepare an application, looking at the criteria before putting up an application, and the depth details of how we can possibly get a successful application. I would like to thank everybody. Kolani, thank you so much for organizing this meeting and championing this meeting. Thank you, everybody. But you can raise all the questions to Kolani and all the SAS members after this if you have further questions or you're looking for a mentor regarding the application, as Prof. Tricia has said. Thank you so much and have a good day.
Thank you, Prof.